The purpose of this meeting actually was to introduce you to what this concept is of the Raza Historical Society of Santa Clara Valley. My name is Fernando Zazueta. I've been asked to serve as president because Blanca Alvarado's health is somewhat delicate and she wasn't able to continue with the responsibilities of it, and I'm happy to take it over because, as far as I can tell, this is a continuation of what started when I first went to Mexico City as a young college graduate. As a farm worker, I was never made to feel proud of my background or who I am. I really had no idea about culture or history or anything. So I went there, and while I was in the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico City, I saw Amalia Hernandez and her folklorico, and I had a lump in my throat and I couldn't figure out why. And it turns out it's because they were playing songs that I remembered from when I was a young boy. But I left all that behind when I went off to college, and I became a college kid. And so this was my first time after college, and I went down there, and I realized that I was an heir to this 5,000-year-old history from the Aztecs and from the Old Mex and from all the other tribes in Mexico, and as it turns out, from the Mayas and from the Incas and so on. So I came back thinking, gee, how come I didn't know that this was my background? And I felt I knew a lot about American history, our English history, and our European history, but I didn't know very much about the history of our people that came up here from Mexico. And I thought, let's build something like this cultural center that we have in Mexican Heritage Plaza, which is one of the most beautiful public buildings in San Jose. Then, Bert Garcia, the young man over here with the very dark hair, I say that with envy. His dad published this El Excéntrico magazine. Some of you may have seen it. There are examples of some of the contents all around the room that Bert has kindly put onto easels so that you can see that we have a long history from 1949 to what, 82? 81? 1949 to 81. And he has all of these in his basement or in his garage. And he said, what do I do with it? So we began to think about how to digitize this, and we're in discussion with San Jose State Library, and they are working the legal issues out with Bert. But from that came this idea that why don't we have a place where we can gather all this information about our community in a identifiable location. So that's why this Raza Historical Society evolved from that. It'll be our first project. It is our first project, but there are other projects, as you will hear later on from people that are speaking. That's the idea behind it. We also thought, while we're at it, have some talk that's relevant to today's issues, and that, of course, is immigration. That subject is so complex and involved that it'll take at least another weekend, entire weekend, just to dedicate it to that. But we're not going to do that. We're just giving you an example of resources, of people who know things. There's some cards in your packet that tell you where to call if you have anyone, any family, any neighbor, anybody you know that needs immigration services. There's a little tarjeta inside your folders. That is the genesis of it. People have started working on this thing, including, of course, Ramon Martinez and Consuelo Rodriguez and Nanette Regua and Steve Robles and Jose Posada, Gil Villagran. All of us thought this has merit. So much so that we have already obtained tax-exempt status with the federal government, so that any contributions, any dues paid to this can be deducted from your income taxes if that ever becomes an issue. Another board member is our late arriving Dr.
I'm sorry.
Torres.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, and most important of all, Marcia Mora, La Coronela. She was very active as a very young woman in a lot of the activities that are featured in this Excéntrico magazine. Well, the mission that we had identified, we worked on, was to gather information about our people, gather data, books, photographs, oral histories, tape recordings. El Castellano, for example, was, before he ever won the lottery, was the videographer for the 16th of September and the Cinco de Mayo parades that we had with the GI Forum. And so he has, for all those years in which we had those parades, he has these videos. Well, what are you going to do with these videos if you just have them in home, right? So we're asking him to cooperate with us, to participate in this, to have a place where people, not just us, but others who are doing any research into our community, can have access to that and go to it. So that, there was another one, I don't know if any of you remembered this guy who was Richard Diaz, and El Fotógrafo de las Estrellas. There was this guy that went to every event that I ever went to, and he took all kinds of pictures, but I never saw them. I said, hey Richard, what do you do with all these pictures? Turns out they're in his garage, and his grandson, he passed away, his grandson is being asked to consider giving us the chance to scan these photographs and have them available for others to share with them. Dr. David Lopez isn't here right now, but he is the guy that has made this available to us, this space, because ordinarily you have to pay to go to a meeting room. But because we're just starting out, he said, come on down and help us out. This was originally the National Hispanic University that was started by Dr. Lopez, and he passed away, unfortunately. I mean, Cruz, Dr. Cruz, he passed away. David Lopez took over, and then the school was sold to the Hispanic Educational Foundation, and here they still continue. They have a partnership with Santa Clara University for students, for teachers to learn how to work within our community. So I told Dr. Lopez, I said, this gives you instant credibility with anyone who may have had some reservations about this particular location in school. So, as pointed out in the agenda, we got the Society's goals and objectives. We want to promote achievement and contributions to the fabric of California and this country. When we started the Mexican Heritage Corporation, I wanted to change, I wanted a different name. I wanted it to be America's Mexican Heritage. But I got voted down because it was too long a name, but I thought it more correctly reflected the idea that it's America's Mexican heritage. We live in Santa Clara Valley, not the Valley of St. Clair. We live in San Jose, not in St. Joseph. I mean, we're surrounded by our people's activities and accomplishments and contributions from the very beginning, when the Pueblo de San Jose became the first civil settlement that wasn't a fort or a mission. San Jose was the first. Los Angeles followed 4 years later. And so we don't acknowledge that, we don't celebrate it very much. We did not until we formed the Mexican Heritage Corporation. And then we started celebrating it over at the Peralta Adobe. Then for a while, when we had one of our mayors didn't believe in birthdays, they stopped celebrating them. But now, thankfully, Los Californios, which is a group of people who trace their ancestry back to the early settlers, the pobladores, started it again. Interestingly, in my research, I found out that Sam Licardo, our current mayor, mom, Laura Aceves, traces her heritage back to the first European who ever saw San Francisco Bay. His name is Joaquin Ortega. Ortega was given a land grant to his son in Rancho San Isidro, just south of San Jose, and she married a guy who jumped ship from Scotland, John Cameron, who changed his name to Juan Gilroy. And so that's where Gilroy started out. But it was that whole Rancho San Isidro. I went to school there at San Isidro Elementary School, just on the curve as you leave Gilroy. I wonder why it was there, because to me, San Isidro was the entrance crossing into Tijuana from the United States. But that's right, the Rancho San Isidro. Dr. Galarza will be behind the screen. Dr. Galarza, of course, is our shining example of a scholar who did so much work in our community. His memorial runs from Market Street, the Plaza de Cesar Chavez, all the way to San Jose State, and you can see his writing inscribed in brass on the sidewalk as you walk, and it's got that table and the hat that's there as a memorial to Dr. Valenza. We've got other things. We've got the arch for Cesar Chavez at San Jose State. We've got the memorial to the Ohlone Indians at that bridge over there by Adobe Systems. We've got Parque de los Pobladores out at the Gore Point of First and Market Streets. We've got things started, but we need other people to know about it, so we're creating historic walks that people can actually go follow and see where things used to be and where things are now. So to allow for a full presentation of this program, it's a little packed. Just hold your questions, write them down somewhere, write them down, and we'll take care of your questions and answers at the end of the program, the formal program. And now we'd like to invite Ramon Martinez and Marcy Mora to talk about their digitization of Luis Garcia's magazine, the scanning of Ramon Ward's photographs of his dad, grandpa, Richard Diaz. Ramon, Marcy.
Thank you, Fernando. Good morning.
15 minutes.
First of all, I want to make sure to clarify, there's stuff in your packet, but there's two papers that are most important. This paper that's blue, that is really, it's following the agenda, but it's got little places for you to mark, I want to help on that. I'm interested in that. We're looking for your interest regarding a bunch of things that we have going. Some of you will have new ideas, but we have plenty of ideas going, but we need help, okay? And you'll get information. Leave this, do not take it. And at the bottom, it also says your assessment, what was good, what could have been better. That means what sucked. What was missing? You should have done this, you should have. Put it down. Because when we go try to talk to foundations about, give me money, they'll say, show me how you evaluate yourself. Everyone says, I'm unbelievably brilliant. Everyone says that. Foundations hear that all day. And they're not going to hand money to anybody who doesn't look like they actually know how to carry things out. I just can't tell you how important that is. Second one is this one. This beautiful brochure which Marcy had printed up. It's got a cut off. Don't cut it off. It's a historic document. You have this white sheet. Please leave this white sheet. This is, if you're going to be a member, I don't care if you're thinking about it. I don't care if you're broke. It doesn't matter. Write down your membership. We'll talk to you about it. They'll explain membership later. Okay. Now, some years ago, I was sitting around with Dr. Gregorio Mora Torres, and he kept talking about El Eccentrico. He's a professor, and he has studied them upside down and backwards. He keeps talking about it. And then so the idea came up, as I looked at the magazine, is Garcia Jr., he's not that old. Where in the heck is he? So I dialed Garcia Jr., who put me on for about 3 months because he thought I was trying to sell him used cars. I said, your magazine is a historic thing. And so it took a while to let him trust us to touch them. This is called about eccentric. It was published for 32 years. All this information you get later. 32 years. So here's the math of El Eccentrico. Michelle, how do I go down? Oh, I'm typing. Just move it up. Here's the Eccentrico map. Okay. Keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. Okay, right there. So this is called the eccentric month. 32 years, twice a month, 12 months in the year, 768 volumes. There are a few on your tables, don't you dare take them. 768 volumes. If you flip through them, that means that there's almost 25,000 pages of history in these books. If you estimate there's 3 pictures per page, and some of them have 4, 5, 6, if you're conservative, there's 75,000 photographs. Okay? 75,000 photographs of our history. Second, there's possibly up to 100,000 pictures. Okay? Now, and so I will say one statement. You can't be passionate in this. There is no history of the Mexican people of this region. There is none that exceeds that right there. Okay? Your children go to school, you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. You have no history. You have no history. And there's hundreds of thousands of pictures just to start. And that's only 1949 till 1981. So that's what this is about. How do we take these magazines, get them digitized electronically? How do they end up at the public library, on the internet? All of them. How do they end up on the internet so that you can put down Rudy Tennis and you go and it's going to tell you volume this, volume that, and it'll tell you what page it's on. This community can do its own genealogy from there. There's no one over 50 or 60 in this town my wedding was in there, my baby picture was in there, my quinceañera was in there. That was all there was. Okay, it's right there. And so that's one effort that we're going to ask you to help with. Marcy, Bert, 1 minute, then Marcy 1 minute, and then I have one special person to introduce. Go ahead, Bert. Anything you want to say?
Well, we appreciate Dr. Martinez and Dr. Torres' effort in helping us coordinate all of this. I probably was the publisher, editor, printer for most of the history of El Excentrico. And I started very young with him, at 10 years old, literally learning the trade. So he passed away in 1974, and I published it for another 6 years. The importance is for us to digitalize all of these and index, as Dr. Martinez was saying, so that it's available for everyone. The magazine covered the history of Santa Clara County principally, and we did so in a social atmosphere. We covered the political events. We covered the births of the babies, and I did a lot of wedding photography. In it, I photographed over 200 weddings in the time that I was doing photography for the magazine. So our hope is to digitalize this soon. We have spoken with the city council and the mayor and a number of individuals here, and we're working on it. But it's a slow process, and it does take, considerable funds. We get estimates of 40 to 60,000 to do that. So it is a project, but we think it's very important for the relevancy of our history here, Latino history here throughout this very important 32 years. So hopefully with your help, we can fulfill that out, that goal of digitalizing the magazine for everyone. Thank you.
Bert. There's a picture frame over there that I want Marcy Mora to go next to, because it's got her big picture right there. Marcy was there all through the beginnings of Excentrico for years and years and years.
You make me sound like a real I was only 5 years old.
And she keeps telling me, I was in a girls group. She says, I was in a girls group called Las Coronelas.
But I first started out with Club Sensory first. When I started, and I said, I'm not a writer, but it was first Trudy Jimenez that started the Excentrico column, and then I met her because we worked for Bertrand, and then she got me involved in the club, and so eventually something happened, and she said, will you take it over for a little while? So then I took it over for a while, and then she ended up getting married, so I continued on. Club Sensory, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It was like getting together, the community, a lot of the groups, the organizations. We used to meet, I think it was once or twice a month, to put it together. We used to assemble them, the Excentricos, We had a lot of fun. Roberto was a very wonderful man, and he kept us all going and kept us active. So, and then eventually I ended up putting a group as I was, we were in Charros, the first Charros in California, San Jose de Guadalupe. And I was their queen for several years, and then I decided to put a group of women. And we even got, we got invited by the governor, and we went to Tijuana, the whole group. And what I wanted to do is get girls and women involved, so we could, continue on. And that's why we had the group of coronelas put together, and we traveled, and we were in parades and all of that. So it was a very nice event. And then I want to really quickly say, we miss a lot, like Rudy Bellamini, Candy Velez, all of these people that are now gone, but not forgotten. They played a big part. And I know Rudy remembered, Rudy Penez, and several of you. And I want to take just one moment, because we just lost one of our writers not too long ago, Carol Martinez. May he rest in peace. It was about a couple of months ago. And he also was in Club Riviera. And we had several organizations. It was wonderful. And we had a lot of fun together. And that's why they call me La Coronela. My mother was La Tenienta, and I was La Coronela. And so, but it was a lot of fun, and thanks to your father for helping us.
Where's Michelle? You know I have dysfunction over here. Put on this video. Can you put on with no sound? Okay. Okay, you just heard a story how we raided one man's basement and all that stuff. We need together to find 100 basements. Santa Clara County has 31 historical groups. There's not a single Latino historical group of any kind in this valley. There's 31 Italian, Vietnamese, Californians. We have no, how many? Japanese American. There is none. Okay? Every day, our heritage is going into the garbage dumpsters. Grandma's tejidos all over the place, dad's pictures. You go ask people about the eccentrico and under the bed. I call it el cajón bajo de la cama. Everybody has a box with stuff, all kinds of stuff, and we need to get it. Ramon Ward, please come forward with that box. All these photographs were taken by Richard Diaz, el fotógrafo de las estrellas. And he was the real deal. Here's his grandson, Ramon Ward, who was with him, carrying his bags. Ramon, hold that up so people can see what it is. This, can you imagine this being in the dumpster? Turn the other side. I'm sorry, I'm being, the camera's on the sides.
On the side.
Open it up. I have no idea what he has there. Watch this.
Well,
But you're seeing, I went to their garage. Go ahead.
jacket.
Oh my goodness.
I remember that jacket.
His press pass from 1977.
Wow.
And then I have
That's Ramon right there. At the bar.
and I have his old Rolleiflex cameras.
That's an antique.
His twin lens Rolleiflex. And some of the Centricos that my grandfather was part of, and Ecocentricos. which was by Rudy Bellamini. And he had a lot of to do with the Alabizador. And these are from like 1987. Yeah, so then these are just some of them. These are just more copies. There's a lot more, but
Thank you, Ramon. We're going to have a chance to talk to him before we're gone. What you're looking at is when we went going to his garage, hundreds of pictures, hundreds. And he has the negatives, thousands of negatives, thousands of magazines. 10 years after El Excentrico, there was El Avisador, another one called Eco Excentrico. They have hundreds of them, and we need to get to that. Richard Diaz, before I leave your stage here, Richard Diaz, Mrs. Diaz, Vera, is sitting back there. Let's give her a big hand. Vera. Thank you. You'll hear more about this project later. Thank you, Vera.
El Castellano is here. I thank you and mentioned you already before you got here, El. So we can ask more questions later. Let's go on next to Jose Posadas. He is the guy that designed and did this flyer that you see that is our first brochure. And he wants to conduct annual recognition of the past and present Raza individual groups and movements. And he wants to use the internet technology to do that. So, Jose Posadas, tell us what you want to do and why you want to do it.
Well, I'll share a quick short story. I work for the Registrar of Voters. Once a month, we go to the theater in Campbell where we're part of the swearing-in process for new citizens. On that day, over 1,200 immigrants become citizens that day. And I get a chance to speak to them before they're sworn in, and I basically tell them three things. One is that becoming a citizen comes with obligations and responsibilities, and one of them is to participate in this democratic process. The second is to register to vote, otherwise why are you becoming a U.S. citizen? And the third is to vote in every election, whether it's a local election or a presidential election. The important thing is to go out and vote. And I share that story because we all come from somewhere else. Most of us are immigrants. I'm an immigrant from Mexico. I was a permanent resident for many years. I didn't think it was that important to become a citizen until Prop 187, and I didn't want my rights to be taken away. So I share that story because I joined this organization because I know that there are a lot of other stories out there, and I want to share that with the community, especially the younger generation who doesn't know a lot about our community, and myself included, because I didn't know about El Excentrico, obviously, until I started joining the organization. And so one of the things that I'm looking to do is to share these stories using some very interesting technology. There's a sheet that's been handed out, and a lot of us are familiar with websites, with newsletters, with email, etc. But there are some fascinating things that are coming out right now that are going to help us to carry that message, especially to the younger generation. A lot of that technology is based on the smartphone. I'll just point out two things on this sheet. One is called Adobe Voice, where using your smartphone you can actually create a story, about a 90-second story in a few minutes. Another one that is really exciting to me is a company called Blipar, which actually created a virtual reality storytelling mechanism where you get your smartphone, you take a photograph of almost any object, and the people that are viewing that object on their smartphone are going to get some either images, they're going to get video. Some of it can be virtual reality. If you go to YouTube right now and look up Blipar, you will see some pretty amazing things that are being done with this technology. And almost everybody in this valley has a smartphone now, and that's how the younger generation is communicating. So we need to use that technology to communicate with them, to tell our stories so that they are familiar with where we came from, where their history comes from. The other things that I'm planning to use are things like infographics, where with just one image you can tell a complete story. Here there's a infographic about Latinos in the United States. It goes over several different demographic information. And so in just one snapshot, you're gonna tell a story to a lot of people. The other interesting thing that is out there is story maps. Think of Google Maps, and layered on top of that is either text, it's either audio, it's either video, images, and by going through this story map, you can click on an object and up pops some story about that object. So I could see us doing that, especially for some of our historical tours, and doing it like a geo map project. So you don't actually have to go out to the physical location. You can go on this map and click on the various landmarks. And by doing that, you're gonna hear the stories of what happened in that building or what artists performed there in 1965. These are amazing things that are being done with the technology today. And so we need to embrace that and share that with the younger generation, because that's how we're gonna save our history. That's how we're going to transfer it from one generation to the next generation. And technology is constantly changing, so probably in 10 years there'll be something else. But right now, this is kind of the direction that technology is taking us, and that's what we need to use to share our stories.
Thank you, Jose.
Very good.
I have a question about that.
Excuse me, Elena, we had asked to reserve the questions till the end so that everyone, is a very limited.
Well, just wondered
Make
if
sure
we
to
get
write
training
them
on that.
down on the sheet. That's the
Right,
point of the
right,
sheet.
down.
Write it down so you don't lose your question.
If
Write
something
it
that,
down.
Okay,
if some, no, if something is said that interests you, by all means, write it down, and there's a sheet there that will tell us you'd like to follow up on something. Clearly, what Jose is doing is the cusp of our, not only our area here, but it's the avenue that we can take to do what we otherwise probably could not have done. And normally you would need a large building, bricks and mortar building as they call it, in order to house all this stuff. But you don't need that anymore. You can put it on the internet. You don't need the books, but you can scan photographs. So you've got photographs of your parents when they came here early. You don't have to give them to us. All we need to do is scan them and then give the photographs back to you. But then they become part of our historical background. And that's what I think is exciting. You saw how clearly important it is, the Eccentrico project, the videos of El Castellanos, the photographs of Richard Diaz. Those are stuff that's there, but nobody knows about it, nobody sees it, you can't have access to it, unless you have something like what we hope to create here through this society. This is fabulous stuff, and he's the guy that did the flyer that you see here, and he did it overnight. Just amazing to me. I'm lucky to open up my computer. Next we have Dr. Gregorio Mora Torres. Late arrival, where is he?
No, he went for an errand.
He went for an errand.
An errand.
An errand.
He
Is
went to
Macario-
get some
Macario-
water because he
Is
forgot.
Macario Ortiz here?
There he is.
Announcing Dr. Mora Torres. Paging Dr. Mora Torres.
He went to get water, so everybody.
No, he's right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, the idea behind all of this has merit. We've got the 501c3 status, tax exempt status. So those are things. My son, who's a lawyer, just came back from serving as a deputy White House counsel on ethics in Washington, D.C. He and a group of lawyers and professionals back there have been trying to get something like a tax exempt organization started. It's been 3 years and they still don't have it because somebody says, well, you do this and somebody does that. What we have done here, thanks to Ramon Martinez, is he took that ball and ran with it. And, you know, he may be abrasive to some people sometimes, but not to everybody all the time. Mora Torres, your presence is required, please, to give us some idea about how you're going to disseminate research, books, articles, magazines, newsprint articles, how you're going to promote all of this stuff. Would you please step forward and be acknowledged? You're a professor over at San Jose State, and you teach what, Mexican American Studies?
We teach everything.
Okay.
Live.
I have some problems with my calculus.
That one we don't. Why did we still do that?
Okay, so you're on for this part of your, and you got 15 minutes. Yeah. You don't need to take all 15 if you don't want
I
to.
can take 5 minutes only.
She's a professor. Take a whole hour.
When I started my interest in Chicano studies, Mexican American studies, we only had about maybe 10, 20 books on Mexicanos in the United States. The vast majority were written in English. And the reason why was because we didn't have historians, professionally trained historians. So ever since 1970s, we've been turning out an incredible number of Chicano historians. So that they have basically covered every single state. From Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, California. And it's actually people who are working in the histories of Mexicanos in Washington State, Oregon State. The Midwest has an incredible number of historians that have done history of Michigan, Mexicanos in Michigan. There's actually a lot of work on Chicago and so on. And so today, we have a significant number of historians. So the question is, how do we get all this information to people? Okay? That's the problem. We don't really have a lot of these people are university trained people. They teach in universities, but how do we get that to people like you and everybody else? Okay? And so that's the purpose of organizations like Raza Historical Societies in Clara County. Our idea is to basically go out there and find those books and disseminate them to the community. And we want to do this through the process of basically setting up a computer network, or just getting people publish pamphlets, publish a list of books that have come out recently, magazines, journal articles that have come out, because you'd be surprised the incredible amount of material that's coming out every year. I read a lot of this stuff every year, and I just don't have time enough to read everything that comes out, especially in the Southwest, so all kinds of things. And so one of the jobs that I see is basically coming out with pamphlets so that people can read, in the public. Tell them about the major historical archives. I mean, San Jose State has this Chicano Resource Center that has, at least 10,000 books and documents. We have stuff that earlier archivists have done, where we have interviews with Jose Carrasco, Martina Garcia, Sofia Mendoza, and they're all there. So we just need to find a way to publicize all that information and get people to go out into the Chicano Resource Center. And, if you go to Berkeley, you go to the Bancroft Library, has incredible amounts of material. Fernando Zazueta likes, early colonial Mexico, early colonial Spain. There's at least 80 memorias of early Californians that are there. And, some of these documents are only, 5-10 pages long, but there's some, that are 100 pages, 200 pages. And that history has never been told from the Chicano perspective. We have a lot of Anglo historians that have looked at the material, but they have given it their own interpretation. So my job is basically to come out and give you access to this information, and hopefully we can do that with pamphlets and whatever material that we have eventually.
Thank you, Gregorio.
Okay.
If any of you want to work in that field, we can help you. We can use you. We need you to give us guidance how to get it. We already have a list, a whole page of resources. Particularly, for example, there's a book by Steve Pitti, P-I-T-T-I, called The Devil in Silicon Valley. That is a pretty accurate depiction of what has evolved here in Silicon Valley with our particular participation in it. But there's a whole list of those. If you want those, just send an email to us. What do you need? Anyway, just send an email to us saying, may I have that list of resources, and we'll be happy to shoot that over to you. Now, the other one is Gil Villagrán. He volunteered to serve on our board. He said, yeah, if you need some help, this looks like a good idea. I'll be happy to help. He's got some background in social history. He has a very lengthy biographical sketch that he wrote, but I've asked him to reduce it to a page. Come on over here, Gil, and tell us how you're going to conduct educational training.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's begin by showing this poster. ¿Quién es? Ernesto Galasta, born in Nayarit, I believe, came through Mexico overland, eventually grew up in Sacramento. As he was growing up, he wrote a book called Barrio Boy. You should all read that book. It's fantastic. About a little boy growing up in Sacramento back when being Mexican was something a little bit shameful for the majority of people. And that quote, this quote, vale más la revolución que se fue, perdón, vale más la revolución que viene que la que se fue. Translated, the revolution coming is more important than the last that went. Now, as an avid amateur historian, I love history. That's what I do for fun. I read history of anywhere, everywhere in the world. But the truth is, who are, as Chicanos, who are our major heroes from the revolution? Pancho Villa and Zapata. And they are my heroes too. But think about that. That's the revolution that happened. Some people call it a frozen revolution. There's actually a film, The Frozen Revolution. But the revolution that's coming is more important. The historical figures like that are critically. I mean, the images, the photographs are fantastic. We have posters everywhere. But the revolutions of today are right here. Ahí está. Ahí está ella. Allí, George. We're all revolutionaries. Not with violence, but with ideas. So that's the idea behind conducting educational training for individuals, children, youth, families, and ourselves, and our neighbors. We know the rich history of Latinos, but what about the neighbor next door? That has a rich history also. As Ramon was saying, there are all these historical societies in Santa Clara County. There's not one for ourselves. So we need to do that. We need to create that historical society right here, right now. You're founding members. Think about it like that. Now, another thing about history is that a famous historian, well, a young man from Spain was very bright, and his father, in the early pre-1900s, said, you know what, my son is so good. Can somebody give me some water? Any water?
There's some water there.
Thank you. A la Marco Rubio. So, he sent his son to Harvard in 1900, I forget the date. He sends his son to Harvard, and his son is such a good student. After he graduated, Harvard says, you can't leave. You have to stay here and teach. So he taught classes. And eventually, he came up with this remarkable statement that I'm always quoting, and I apologize if you've read this before for me, but those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. How more true could that be? We forgot the history of U.S. interventions. We intervened in Iraq. We broke Iraq. And the people, the Mujahideen that had trained in Iraq, no, in Afghanistan, I'm sorry, they came back. What did they do on 9/11? Right? They rode their airplanes into the World Trade Center. 9/11, when that happened that morning, I'm getting ready to go to work, and I said, 9/11? Bombing the World Trade Center? My brother-in-law used to work at the World Trade Center. And then I thought, wait a minute, what else happened in September 11, 1971? September 11, in Santiago, Chile. We are trained of the Chilean Air Force bombed their presidential palace. So we did to Chile, not directly but indirectly, what they did to us. History is so fascinating. It bounces back and forth. It's like echoes. So we need to train ourselves and each other and our children. So in this beautiful book, Stephen Kitty from Yale University, I just saw this at the bookstore in San Jose State. I was teaching their social work, and I said, I wonder what Mexican American studies books they're using. So I went to that part of the bookstore, and I always do that. And I found this book, and my God, the devil in Silicon Valley. Look at that image. So it's the devil, and I don't know who it is. They're playing cards, or I don't know, taqueria. But anyway, buy this book. But let me just read and finish with this